the best cultures win because the team starts reinforcing them. It's not like it starts with the leader who is that broken record for a while. If it's going to work though, like it will be because people catch on to it and they become the police. Like they're the ones who start to like hold people to account and call them out on things, both good and bad.
Welcome to Think Outside the Boss, where I have with me the one and only Tim Metzner. Tim is the founder and CEO of FireRoad, an early-stage venture fund and holding company focused on building, buying, and investing in businesses in AI-resistant categories. Now, prior to FireRoad, Tim launched several venture-backed businesses that have created over $2 billion in value. And this is incredible. Some of these include Differential, Astronomer, Apollos, and Coterie Insurance, which is one of the fastest growing small business insurance companies in America. Tim believes that entrepreneurship can change the world by creating great jobs and great culture. And this inspired him to co-found Ocean, a nonprofit that has supported thousands of entrepreneurs in staying committed to their faith, their family, and their health while building companies that are a force for good in the world. He's powered by faith, his amazing wife, and his 4 kids. And you can get inspiration from him at thedailymo.com. So welcome to Think Outside the Boss, Tim Metzner.
Thanks for having me. You made it sound easy. Like that was like no big deal, that journey.
Yeah. I mean, that was like last week for you?
Yeah, no, right. No big deal.
No big deal. Yeah, and that's actually a good place to start too, is I remember way back in the day, like when we were all meeting in a small group in Norwood,
Yes.
before any of us had kids, and you had a job. Kind of take us back to that moment of like when you decided to leave, like, having a job, in that world, and really when entrepreneurship came calling to you.
Well, we should be clear, like that job was a startup. So even
Oh,
the
okay.
first, even my very first job, I joined a startup when I was in college. So I was like employee number 5 of a startup. And I joined that company because the founder of that business, Chris Downey, had built and sold his first company, which was called Up for Sale. He sold to eBay in the late 90s. And I met him in 2000. And he was starting another company while doing his earnout with eBay. And it was like a startup I didn't understand. And I'm like, man, I just want to go learn from this guy. So I jumped into a startup in college. That was my first job. I ended up joining them full time after school as well. And so I did get a kind of peek behind the curtain. And I will say, I think there was, a nugget of in college, this moment where I felt like, I didn't know it at this time, but it was a seed planted by God to be an entrepreneur. Like the program I was in was really built for like your journey. It was like built for the future leaders of corporate America, not built for, startup founders. And so that really should have been the path. And yet I was very drawn to this idea of like, well, what would it look like to start a business? And I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was. I didn't take any classes in it. I had no idea, but it was like there's something about this. I think in hindsight, I think there were some. So Chuck Matthews has been at University of Cincinnati forever teaching. Like I didn't meet him until after I graduated. I didn't even know about entrepreneurship classes, but there weren't very many for sure. And there was no major or minor or track. It was just like, if you found them, cool. But for some reason, I wanted to go work for a founder. I wanted to learn about starting companies. And so that was the first job. And I knew, well, number one, I was like completely ruined from having a normal job after that experience. And I did have friends who went to P&G and Kroger and Fifth Third and Great American and some of these great companies we have in the Cincinnati area. And I got to kind of directly compare and contrast like their experience in their co-op versus mine. And it's just like, man, there's something really special about the opportunity you get, even as a young, early, clueless 20-something to go. I was 19, I think, actually. Yeah. So, but the amount of responsibility given to me and the opportunity to go learn and grow, I fell in love with that. I fell in love with like what a small team can accomplish when they're motivated and rowing in the same direction. And so even then, even though I was just an employee, like in the back of my mind, I knew like at some point I want to start a company. And so I always joke with people, like when you get married, you shouldn't surprise your spouse with the fact that you're an entrepreneur or trying to grow a beard afterwards, or that you ride a motorcycle. Like these are things they should know ahead of time. So I knew, and I think Christy, my wife, knew, like at some point he's going to start a company. It was just sort of a matter of When's the right time?
Yep.
Which,
Yeah.
by the way, is a misnomer. There is no such thing as the right time, as you know.
Yeah. Yep. I was just gonna say that. I'm like, there really isn't a
That's not a
right.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're waiting for the right time, if you're out, if you know, in our audience and you're listening, you're like, I
Yes.
want to start a company. There is no great time. So when did you
It's one of my
first?
favorite quotes from Daily Mo is like, if you're waiting for the perfect situation, it'll never come. Like you won't ever start the company, write the book,
Yeah.
run the marathon, climb like it just there will, it's not a thing. So you're just gonna have to decide like today's the day I take a step forward.
Yes. Maria Forleo, she says, start before you're ready.
Yes.
And yeah, that definitely, I was like, that is the total opposite of how I worked in the corporate world for decades.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's always plan, plan, plan. Don't, oh, wait, hold on. Don't do. We must think and plan and talk and meet first. And you need a
Yeah.
balance of both. We need a
For
balance of both.
sure. Yes.
Yes. So I ask this of every guest on the show, but when you think back
hmm
through your life, when did you first realize that you were a leader?
My knee-jerk reaction is high school, but I think it was even earlier than that, honestly. Like even in elementary school, I can think back to moments where like teachers trusted me with things. And I don't know that I could have put like my finger on why that is or what that is, or I would have called it being a leader. But in hindsight, I would say like there are some clear characteristics and qualities that other people first saw in me before, I saw it in myself. And so in high school, I became very aware of it just through sports and extracurricular activities. Like, I just had this desire to step up and be one of the voices that would say the hard thing or challenge people or step into a role that needed to be done. So that became pretty clear to me in high school for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, yeah, high school and then college, you talked about like working for this, your first startup. What was
Yes.
the first company that you founded or co-founded?
So there was a side hustle company while I was at that startup. I tried to start my first company on the side. It was called Quite Liked. This was like early. I hardly ever talk about this actually because I was never full time and it was like this side hustle, but it failed. And it was like early days of the Facebook like button. If you think way back to early Facebook,
Yeah.
like all of a sudden this like button showed up all over the internet. And I had this thought of like, what if you could build a media company on that? Like, what if you could use the data from likes to help surface the best kind of content for individuals based on like their desires? And so tried to build this kind of quasi media company on the side, and we never went full time on it and eventually just shut it down. But I still look it back at that today. Like it actually may have been one of my better ideas. I just didn't know how to execute at the time,
Yeah.
honestly. So that was a failed side hustle.
Yes. How did you handle I mean, did you view it as a failure at the time? Or were you like bummed about it? Or were you like, oh, that was fun and on to the next thing?
I was definitely bummed because I felt like we missed an opportunity. I mean, I didn't think it failed because it was a bad idea. It felt like we failed to execute. It didn't build the right team around it, didn't give it the right, resources and focus. And so I think I was frustrated because I had these like part-time co-founders. It was basically just like friends who I convinced to spend time on this thing. But I was spending the most time on it for sure. And, I didn't have all the skills needed to make the thing successful. And they didn't have time, energy, or interest like I did. And so I was definitely bummed that it failed because I had this awareness of like it was lack of execution, not a terrible idea necessarily. And I do think it would have like it wouldn't have been some ginormous like media company or like lasted forever. The Facebook like button was a bit of a fad, so we would have had to evolve. But I think we could have had an interesting run if we had executed on that one.
That's a cool story. The Facebook like button. Man, we've come a long way in technology.
Yes.
So far. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you on the podcast is because of how much you prioritize and talk about culture in a company. So, could you share like how do you view culture and like kind of what yeah, we'll start there. Like what is your view on culture and like how did you get to that viewpoint about the importance of culture in a company?
I mean, I think it definitely started in that first startup where if you're in a startup environment with smart people who work hard but also want to like have fun together, that was my first experience. That was my first work experience. Like we worked out of a house in Mount Auburn, and Clifton was like where I would show up for work first. And it was it was cool. It was a cool environment. Like people who had obviously accomplished way more than I had were kind of here, and they took work seriously, but they also took like enjoying work very seriously. Like we had a lot of fun, even though we worked hard in those days. And it was like this cool awareness of when we're rowing in the same direction and you surround yourself with people you enjoy being with who are also like motivated to build a great company, like, you really can accomplish a ton. And I think there was definitely in the early days we may have swung a little too far on the like, foosball and whatever spectrum. Like I did play quite a bit of foosball in those early like startup days, which is a bit of a like culture cliche and like startup
Of
world.
course.
Kegs and ping pong tables and foosball, and like maybe we swung a little bit on that end, but it did give me a taste for it and helped me appreciate like how well, number one, like how loyal those, like so many of those employees worked at that same company for a very long time. And a lot of
Mhm.
that was like because they built a culture where they were taken care of and cared about and given meaningful work to do, but also like didn't take themselves too seriously. So that was the early
Mm.
taste of it. And then I think as a founder myself, getting to experience it, it's like the first time, you hire someone and you're like responsible for putting food on someone else's table, like there's an awareness of the weightiness of that for sure. And so that weighed on me quite a bit. But then, as you start to get some history and track record together, there's also like what I saw and what sort of fascinated me was I saw people come alive at work. Like people who maybe had not ever come alive at work before. Like people who were really talented and good human beings, but probably never worked for someone who cared about them as a human being. It was more of a like, they come
Mhm.
from a corporate command and control, like, these are your KPIs, just hit your KPIs and hit the nail and keep doing that. And like, you'll get promoted. Right. And I'm not saying there's
Mm.
necessarily anything wrong with that, but I've seen it enough times what happens on the other side of that, where like all of a sudden Katie not just gets to do this thing she's really good at, like she's cared about as a human. And I ask her about her family and we talk about things outside of work. And, I genuinely care about where you want to go in your career. And I ask things like, what skills do you need in order to get to the next stage of like your dreams and goals? Like, let's make sure we're putting you in a position to build those skills while you're here. Right. And it's crazy how much that unlocks someone to not just do good work, but like what I saw, what really fascinated me was like these people very oftentimes became, I don't know if they would say it, like I observed like probably better spouses, probably better parents. Like they were
Yeah.
more engaged in their community. They were like picking up hobbies that they had dropped years ago or finding new ones. Like they were coming alive not just at work, but outside of work. And I think so much of that was just a focus on, are we hiring people who agree with what we agree with? Like, can we hire them based on kind of what we value as a team, and
Mhm.
and on the work, like where are we going? Like, do you care about the mission like we care about the mission? And then, like, once they're here for the right reasons, do we take care of them? Do we care about them? Do we ask them about their family? And I won't say I was like really smart about this and knew what I was doing. I kind of stumbled into it, and then just had
Mhm.
this awareness of like, oh, that was actually really like building a company is cool and solving problems with a business and like scaling it is really interesting and fun. But the impact that I had on the people that we hired was actually the thing that like really pulled on my heartstrings. Like it's really cool to
Yeah.
get to see someone experience growth professionally and personally because you've created this company and given them a job and a chance to do that. So that was the early nugget that I just kept leaning on over time.
Yes. And so for the leaders and the people listening in the audience, so I mean, it's great to have this conversation with you because I come from like 20 years of corporate before entrepreneurship.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of leaders in, I say corporate meaning like a publicly traded company, like a huge
Sure.
company, but
Big
it could
co.
be
Yeah.
a large private company. It's
Yep.
whatever, but it's like a structured company. And there's a lot of leaders who do care about their people there. And they ask that, they're like, well, okay, I'll ask like, well, how are you today, Tim? How is
Right.
your family? And like they try to remember those things, but it doesn't come off in the same way. And what I
Mm.
realized in, when you talk about valuing people, like all at the end of the day, everybody just wants to feel valued. They want to feel like they're a part of something, like they're
That's right.
making a difference.
Yep.
And I was told that I was valued over and over again throughout my
Mm.
career. But the difference, I think, was at a larger company, like you are valued until you're not.
Right.
And you're valued as long as you go along with whatever they tell you to do. And when I started showing resistance to that, of like, no, why don't we do something else? Why don't we try something
Mhm.
else? Long story short, I ended up leaving the company, and like they could have cared less that I left,
Right.
like, I mean,
Oof.
some people
Oof.
cared,
Yeah.
right? Some people care. And I have seen this happen time and time again with
Right.
friends, with family, with, fellow like classmates from business school. And so when you say like, I cared about the people, we got the foosball table, I'm asking them about their
Mhm.
family. I see great leaders implement those tactics, but yet still the employee isn't truly valued. And so I'm like, what's the formula for that? I don't know if you've ever thought about it or put like, hey, these are the questions to ask or these are the
Yeah.
steps.
I mean, I think it starts with the heart posture. Like, what's your motivation for it? Like, are you asking about the person because you read a leadership book that says employees respond better when you ask them about their personal life? Or you're asking about it because like you genuinely care about like Katie and her well-being and you want good things for her, right? Like I think it just starts simply with like what's the motivation behind it? I read there was a book that really informed some of my early thinking on culture, or actually on leadership, how to lead well. It's called The Alliance. It was written by Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn, and co-written by someone else. But the premise of the book was pretty simple. He's like, look, most employee-employer relationships are built based on this structure of you go to work at Ford or Procter and Gamble out of college, and you retire from Ford or Procter and Gamble at the end of your career. Like that's sort of how we structure engagements to just assume like run it forever. But in reality, that's not how employment works anymore, right? Like people, it's a lot more transient than that. People, it's very common for people to, or very uncommon, let's say, for people to even stay as long as you did at P&G, right? Like that's not the normal path for most people anymore. But that's kind of still how we treat it. And the premise of the book on how to do it differently was like, look, if we know that this may just be a tour of duty for you, like, let's be okay with that. So why don't we instead make sure we understand like what are your career aspirations? Like what do you actually want to do? Do you want to start a company of your own someday? Do you hope to be CFO somewhere? What are your actual aspirations? What do you hope to get to someday? Let's make sure that like I'm hiring you into a role and giving you a position to grow in ways that will help you march towards that. And simultaneously, you have to understand very clearly like what's the company mission? What are we trying to accomplish? Where are we going? And to the extent that you can, number one, level up in ways that will help you in your journey, and number two, level up the company in ways that will help us on our journey, there's this like great alliance. There's this mutually beneficial, like that might not be forever, but for as long as it makes sense to, let's keep coming back to it and keep asking, like, hey, is this still where you're going in your career? Is this still where your hopes and aspirations are? And are we moving you closer to that? Do you feel like you're making progress in that? And then, the same, obviously, we're going to have to hold you to account on the ways that we need you to help us grow this business, but you just find people end up being like incredibly loyal when you're building into them as well, and you're making sure that they're tracking with where they want to go, not just the company is tracking. And then you said something earlier that strikes me as actually really important in terms of like motivating people, and it is really hard when you scale to do this well, but like when you're a small team of 3, 5, 10, 15, 25 employees, it's really easy to connect the work you're doing to the progress of the company. Like what the company's goals are, and you can actually you can see a direct tie to like the way I'm spending my time and how that's benefiting this organization. And that like it gives people purpose and meaning. It matters quite a bit to most people, right? In an organization of even 100 people or 200 people, it gets a lot harder to do that. Like you start to hire people into like really specific kind of roles that are more individual contributors, and it's really easy unintentionally to disconnect the person's work from like the meaning and purpose of the company. And I think what great leaders do is like they make it clear that on this team, in this organization, within our realm, our sphere of the business, here's what's most important. And here's why you're doing the work you're doing and how it ties to what's most important to us. And yes, it also, by the way, ladders up to what's most important to the organization. That takes a lot of work actually to do that well and to keep doing that and to make sure it's still true and to help people make sure they understand that like it's not easy. And it I think it's hard for it was hard for me because being a part of like the startup environment, like small team, early stage, like you don't have to spend any time on it. If you hire well and you give people like permission to go do great work, like that happens naturally. But as you start to scale, it doesn't happen naturally anymore. Like, oh shoot, like we've got to actually spend time being really intentional about helping people connect their work to the organization's kind of mission and growth.
So, what percent, like just to help people kind of quantify, because it does take a lot of time to be intentional, to have those conversations, and especially ask it in a way of like, you know, no, how are you today? And it's like sometimes like right before a big meeting may not be the time to like dive into it, but it does take time to have those conversations. So like roughly like what, I don't know if it's a percent, but like how much time have you spent on like building culture and having those conversations? Like what part of your job is that? How big of a piece of the pie is it?
Man, I don't know how to put a percentage on it, but I'll share some examples of like things
Yeah.
that I think move the needle really, really well. So like the first is when I'm leading folks, I have a separate like one-on-one meeting. And it's monthly for me. I don't think the cadence has to be monthly necessarily, but we have at least one-on-one a month where we don't talk about work. Like we're not here to talk about your to-dos and your KPIs and how you're tracking. Like we're here to talk about your alliance. Like and I'll create a document. It's like let's make sure I understand where you're going. And I want to see your personal goals. They might be professional or personal goals. And when we
Mm.
get together in that monthly rhythm, like we're going to talk about that stuff. And I'm going to ask you questions about how I'm doing as a leader, what you're seeing in the company. Like the other part of this is like as you scale an organization, like for whatever reason, people stop coming to you, even though your door's open, quote unquote. Like you stop hearing some of the gripes and challenges and watch outs. And like, so for me,
Yeah.
that's also an opportunity to go like, hey, you're the canary in the coal mine now. If there's an issue with our culture or our product or whatever, like you might know about it before I do. So I use those one-on-ones as like, let's check in on your goals and how you're tracking and how you're doing as a human being and just spend time together, talking about you. And then like I will use it as a chance to like learn from you. Like, what are we doing wrong? I'll ask questions like, if you were to start a competitor of ours tomorrow, what would you do different? What are you seeing? And I just have this
Ooh,
kind of
that's a great
assortment of
question.
questions like that I'll just mix in there to go like, and I will tell you, like at first people are pretty hesitant to be like transparent and open,
Mhm.
either about like personal stuff or about what they're seeing in the company. But like the more vulnerable you are as a leader, the more you suggest stuff like, hey, I think I messed up on this thing. Like just call yourself out on it. Like, oh, we can talk about that. Like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure I got that one wrong. Like, what do you think? And like
Yeah.
over time, people will get more direct with you and they'll actually start to see that. And then the other part of it is like if they're giving you feedback and they actually see you doing stuff about it, right? Like you're not going to change every little thing about the company that they don't like, but over time, like there's probably some stuff that you should change. If you actually listen to that and they see change happen, like they'll be encouraged, right? They'll be encouraged to keep sharing transparently and to share more with you.
As you're describing that, I can't help but think of Ted Lasso. Like in
It's the
season
mustache,
1,
isn't it?
maybe that's it. But when he has the suggestion box and Roy Kent was like, he fixed the showers.
Yes.
And then that was like the first, like, that was a moment of truth with the team
Yeah.
of like, oh,
They're
wow,
listening.
he listened. It was the smallest thing, but for some reason that was like coming to mind
That's
with,
it. I,
yeah.
I think you're right. I remember when we started Differential, which was like the first company I started that didn't fail. It's still around and doing well. um, we, my co-founder and I had this conversation early on. We said like, what would it look like to build the last company we would ever want to work for? And like, I don't know if this will be the last company, but like, what would it look like to try and build that kind of company? And then like every year we would bring employees together and we called it DI week. It was like differential week. And we had remote employees. So it was part of it was like get in person. Like let's bring everyone to the same place for a week together. And one of the questions we ask every year is that same question to them, like, hey, what would it look like for this to be the last company you would ever want to work for? Like what would have to be true? And for the first 5 years, like there was almost always something pretty meaty on there. Like, I remember at some point it was like, we need benefits. Like we're still kind of letting people figure it out on their own. Like we need to figure this out. We need a retirement plan. We need there were things like that. Like these are pretty meaningful for us as employees at this stage. We're like, we would, pick one meaty thing a year and we would do it. Like we would listen to like what is most important to our employees. And, it wasn't always meaty and huge like that. Like I think you're right. Like the shower, fix the shower is like a great example of like, are you listening? Like, are you hearing us? Right. So coming back together, that's another rhythm, an annual rhythm of like, this is your company, not just our company. Like, what can we do to make it better? Right. So there's like group rhythms. I think there's individual one-on-one rhythms that build like that that are a leadership thing, and I think there's culture things that are more team based. And I think the annual one's a good one. We would do, most companies I've been a part of, we do some form of like, call it Friday wins, like all team, all hands meeting, and we just celebrate like who's kicking butt in the company. Like not your own wins. Like I want you to call out someone else. Like what did you see? And, a bonus tip on this, like one of the things we started doing was like we required you to tie it to one of our core values. It's like we want to reinforce these like these stated things that matter most to us. Let's use this as an opportunity to call them out regularly, reinforce them, and talk about them on an ongoing basis. And you can use core value. Like, core values, I actually think, are the heart of a culture. Like I believe if you get those right and you reinforce them consistently, and you hire based on them and you fire like that's a lot of creating great culture, honestly.
Yeah. It is the implementation of those cultures. A lot of people just write them. It's like, oh, I need it for the website. All right.
It's a starting
But
point, but like,
right.
are you actually living by it? And there's a
Yeah.
there's a process I like to do. I call it like core values in action. It's like you might have a value that says something like, like we value humility or whatever. And we might have the same core value. It might mean something very different in my company, in my organization at this time than it does for you and yours. And so I love to do this. Like, what does it look like to be humble at this company? Like, pick all of your core values and like write a document. It's like, here's what these values look like in action at our company right now. And so people
Mhm.
start to get a feel of like, oh, that's what you mean when you say intelligence or whatever the core value is. And
Right.
then you start to see them like actually call people out in that way in those like Friday meetings. Like now it really starts to come to life and kind of become self-reinforcing.
Yeah. I love that because usually the values are, like they're big words like trust,
Yeah. Yeah.
integrity,
It's pretty
like
generic and oftentimes, right?
generic, like celebration or what,
Yes.
whatever it is. And it's really hard to like, sometimes they're so big that it's like, I don't know,
Like,
like,
what does that
and so
mean?
I,
Yeah.
yeah, and one of the things I've learned in the work that I do since leaving corporate and working with private companies is like it is that tie of like what am I doing and how am I
Hmm.
representing the value? How does my work affect the bottom line? How does my work affect other people? Because sometimes we feel like we're on an island and we're not
Right.
impacting anyone or impacting anything, or we don't feel like we're listened to, all those different ways of
That's
like
right.
how we don't feel valued. And so at a smaller company, it's a lot easier to like see that impact because, to your point, if there's 5 people, like you're 20% of the company. Like
Yeah.
it's a it's
But
it's a
the other
bigger
thing I've
deal.
seen though, to your point of like, it is easier in a small company because if especially if the founder is like committed to it and they're like like you got to kind of sound like a broken record. Like we're reinforcing our company, like values and like mission, vision, values. Like keep reinforcing that all the time. Like if you feel
Yep.
like you're saying it too much or not saying it enough and like people still don't get it, you got to do that even more as the company scales. Some of the things I've seen happen though, like you get to, large organizations with several hundred employees or more, and like culture is not necessarily this like broad it's not the same across the organizations. Like great leaders will build it though within their own organization. And sometimes even it might be like their own set of core values. Like for our team, our organization, like here's what matters the most to us, or here's our implementation of the corporate core values, but what it means on our team and our org. So it's like you got to bring, especially as a company scales, like you've got to make it more real for people and let them feel a part of like not just understanding what it is. Like the best cultures win because the team starts reinforcing them. It's not like it starts with the leader who is that broken record for a while. If it's going to work though, like it will be because people catch on to it and they become the police. Like they're the ones who start to like hold people to account and call them out on things, both good and bad. It won't work if it's always top down. Like at some point, it has to become this like, this is a we thing. And you got to understand what that is. And you've got to set direction and be clear on what it is and what it isn't. And you've got to defend it when you have to at times. But the team will take over at some point.
I love what you're saying. And that is what you just described. If have you read The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Pat Lencioni?
No, I haven't. I've heard much about it, but I've never actually read that one.
You're following it even though you don't realize it. This was the book that changed my life after I left corporate. And I'm like, why did I leave? Like, I was essentially so miserable. I'm like, I'm leaving, but I liked all the people and I just couldn't figure it out. But there's a pyramid, and the foundation of the pyramid is trust. And so it's psychological safeties, and you need trust with people so that you can have healthy conflict, debate, you can attack problems, not people. And then only when you've gone through that debate period can you move on to buy-in and commitment. And then on top of that comes accountability. And the ideal accountability is peer to peer accountability, which is what you just
Yes.
described beautifully.
Right.
It's not leaders saying, I think we're both parents too, where it's not like, I've seen my kids start to hold each other accountable, which is always interesting because sometimes they do it in the right way. And sometimes I'm like, maybe not.
That's not it.
Uh,
Yeah.
but when you're talking with a group of adults, at a company, it's like you can't, nor should you, as the leader, the president, the CEO, hold everyone individually accountable. Like
Right.
that's not your job description, but it's to create the culture so everyone else, you hold each other accountable. So I totally agree with that. I think that's a thing, like that's a piece of accountability that a lot of people
Yeah.
miss, and they feel like leaders, we think it's all on us to change the world, and
Right.
it's not.
I agree with all that. I would add just a couple of thoughts to that, just from kind of lived experience that I
Yeah.
wish I had maybe earlier. Was like, I think trust is the right word and it's really important, but there's another level to it, and that's like care. Like, not only
Mm,
if I trust you as a leader, that absolutely is an unlock. If I believe that you actually care about me as a human being, that's another unlock. And then the third
mhm.
one, I think, is like evidence that you will give, like, assign credit. So it's like, if I know you care about me, if you regularly call me out for stuff that, like, other leaders might take credit for, but you're like, no, 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 this was Katie. This has nothing to do with me. Like, publicly, like, acknowledging, like, this was because you kicked ass, not me. And
Mhm.
and I do things that make it clear that I care about you as a human. Like, now I have permission on a whole nother level to also challenge you. Like, when I call you out on
Yes.
your bullshit, you'll know it comes from a place of like, well, you do really care about me, and like you will
Yeah.
celebrate me, and like you want the best for me, and like we can have harder conversations. We can go there faster when those things are true. And I don't think that's a common. I don't think most leaders get that right, honestly.
No, it definitely takes time. The best teams that I have worked with, there's a sense of camaraderie. Like they call each other out, and it's
Yes.
hilarious, like that's just the culture of the team. Like we're not afraid to give each other feedback and be like, Tim,
Right.
what are you thinking? Like that's,
Right.
and say things like that. And the self-awareness, is something that drives it too. So I have like two questions for you that come to mind. So
Okay.
one, when, for the audience listening, if they're in a situation, okay, they're not at a startup, they're at, a company of maybe they have 50 employees, 100 employees, or they're leading a
Hmm.
team in a corporate environment, and they're like, our culture sucks. It is not the
Yeah.
way you just described it. Where would you recommend that they start? Like, what's something that where's like one action they can do to just start thinking like, how do I change this? How do I change the culture?
Yeah. That's a hard one because it depends on their situation, like where they're at in the company. I would say if you have anyone that you get to lead, like that's where it starts. You just, like, regardless of how you're being led, like, be the example, right? From the people
That's
under you
good.
down, like, we're going to decide that this is going to be different. And maybe I have to be the shield against some miserable leaders ahead of me or folks who don't get it. And here's what I'd say. Like, I don't think it's intentional in most cases. Like, no one wants to build a
Mm-mm.
bad culture. No one sets out to go like,
No.
this is going to be a place where you are miserable at work, but we're going to be profitable. Like, that's not what people do. Like, but you have folks who get stressed out. You have high IQ, low EQ leaders who, like, it's just an outage for them. They don't
Yeah.
understand that they're creating an environment that might not be ideal. Like, they don't even understand that this is true in a lot of cases. So I don't think it's intentional. but I do think you always have a choice of like, how am I going to react to that? Like how am
Yes.
I going to lead the people I get to lead? How, even if you're not a leader, how am I going to treat the other people on my team and around me? And like,
Yes.
you can lead by example without being a leader by how you care about folks and how you interact in meetings and even how you lead up, right? Like how you react to stuff coming your way. It's like we don't get to control other people's behavior, but we have full
Nope.
control over how we're going to react to it. And no one's perfect at that, but to the extent you're intentional about it and you think about it and you call yourself on it and you watch yourself, like
Mhm.
you may have a chance to start to impact just through your own actions. And at some point, you have to decide like, if I can't be a part of the change, like you can either work really hard to change it or you can get out of there. But spending time, whining about it is not going to be good for anyone. So
Yeah.
you get to
Amen.
decide, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I love what you said when you like kicked it off where you're like, regardless of how you're being led, you can still be a great leader. Like whatever
Yes.
I was like, I don't, do you remember exactly what you said? Because I want to put it on a t-shirt. And like,
It seems obvious, but I don't think it is, right? Because we get so
yeah,
caught up in the like, woe is me, I have this terrible environment and leader, and like, well, hold up, how are you doing?
yeah. Yes. So, second question, I get asked this all the time because I went from a corporate environment to my own business, which was actually not my plan at all when I left corporate. That's a whole
Mm,
other story.
yeah,
But entrepreneurship is really trendy right now. Startups are really trendy with social media. All you have to do is like basically put coach after your name on Facebook and like you're in business. So, and
sweet.
it's right, like it's wonderful. But I have a lot of people ask me, they're like, they're frustrated with where they're at. Like they don't like the culture of the company and entrepreneurship or a startup or whatever. It just sounds awesome. And when people they're like, "Oh, how do I start my own company?" And I'm like, maybe you shouldn't. Like I was like, it's
Hmm.
way like it has my answer. Well, I shouldn't even answer this, but like I'm curious on how other people answer that because I always say I'm like you got to like put a lot of thought into it. It's not
Hmm.
as easy as it seems. So, as one who has started many companies and you've only worked for startups and an entrepreneur, like if someone has that question of should I leave my job and start my own thing, how would you advise them?
First cautionary, just like you, like yes, it's sexy and glamorous on the outside looking in, and even when most people know like this is hard, it's not an easy thing to do, but I think we still just get caught in the headlines. My advice is always like the only time you should really start a company is if you can't not start a company. Like there
Oh,
is a burning desire, there's a problem that bothers you so much that like even if I said, Katie, there's no chance in hell this thing is going to be successful, you go, cool, watch me try. Like you would do it anyway because you'd be so
right,
bummed, like the regret of not running after that problem or that space or whatever would eat at you. So if that's true, then like now's the time, just go. Like because
yeah,
back we were talking about this, there's never a right time to start a company. So like the right time is when you can't not do it. Like the thing is keeping you up at night, like run after that thing. But no,
yeah,
like it's going to be really hard. Like it's going to require more persistence, more grit, more determination, more of God's grace than you ever thought possible. Like
yeah.
I mean, I tell people all the time, if you want a great prayer life, go start a company because you'll be put in so many
Seriously,
situations where like you literally have like I don't know anything else other to drop on my knees and go like God, I don't help me with this one because I have nothing and like in the
right,
rearview mirror, you'll go like, "Oh, God obviously showed up." You're like, it will increase your faith because you'll be praying more
right,
often. And like, if things work out, you can't take credit for it because like I had no idea what I was doing. So, just
right.
know that that will be the case. This is the situation that you're signing up for. So, if that sounds awesome, go for
Yeah,
it. But I think starting with like really mission, passion driven on like, here's the thing I really want to go do, not just I want to have control over my schedule or make a bunch of
mm,
money or whatever. Like
yeah.
maybe that stuff will happen, but my experience has been early on, you make way less money and you have way less control over your schedule because you're working your face off to try and get this thing off the ground. Like it's
And
just
way
really
higher
challenging.
stress.
Yeah,
Or
way
it
higher
can
stress
be
than you
just
ever
as
thought.
stressful. It's just a very different type of stress.
Yeah,
It's
I don't have the
you
big
can
co corporate stress, so I don't know, but I know people are very often very stressed out in those environments too. So I can
Yeah,
only
it's a
speak to the startup stress, but
totally different type of stress, but it is just as stressful, just in a different way. So you get to choose your stress. You get to choose your
yeah,
hard in life.
for
Cool.
sure.
So we are going to wrap up with the lightning
Okay,
round. Are you ready
let's
for the
go.
lightning round, Tim?
Bring it.
All right. First question. What is your favorite personality assessment?
I don't really, I don't have Enneagram would be my only one, but I'm
Okay.
not a big personality assessment guy.
Oh, that's interesting. With as much as you talk about culture, I was curious if you use one of those as a tool. So, but you
Cloverleaf is
don't.
my favorite tool for it because they have all the assessments. So like I've used Cloverleaf before, and I'm a huge fan of that team and the product they built.
Cool. Yeah, we had Darren on earlier
Oh,
in
sweet.
yeah, yeah, he was one of our early guests. Cool. All right. What is a book that was instrumental in your life?
The Bible for sure. Outside of the Bible, I mean, I talked about the Alliance from a culture leadership
Mhm.
standpoint. That one was really powerful. Yeah, those are ones. Like, I mean, I have a bunch. I have to look back at my list just because there's. I would want to look
Yeah.
at the ones I reread, but yeah,
I have a question on the Bible because I know you're a man of deep faith, and neither of us try to hide our faith in our
yeah,
careers. Because there are people who a lot of people will say like, "Oh, the Bible," and it's almost like, well, that's like the Sunday school answer.
right,
If you could just like, how do you read the Bible? Like,
yeah,
what is? I would love for you to expand on that for
for
people that
sure.
are like probably rolling their eyes, like, of course, the Bible.
Okay, the Bible. Like, but that is like that is not my like that is my legitimate answer. Like that is the book I read the most, I
I
have read the
know.
most, I
Yeah.
spend the most time in, like right without question.
How do you use
And
it
I
as a
will
tool? Yeah.
so I'll say like, for the first part of my like faith journey, it did not feel helpful. It felt like a chore and work to read it, and I felt like it was like it's kind of like with having a kid. Like the first year, it's all give. It's like I'm just doing the work, I'm putting it in, and like then all of a sudden you get a smile flashed at you, and you're like, oh, it's over, right? So I feel like it was kind of the same reading the Bible. Like there were years of like just keep going, like because most days you're like reading, like I don't really know that I got much out of this. I'm not sure I understand it, or I don't know how useful this is to me. It feels like antiquated. And then like over time, the more I studied it, the more I surrounded myself with other people who could explain it, who could let me ask stupid questions about it, the more real it became for me. And,
Mm,
now it's at the point where if I don't spend time in scripture in the morning to start my day, like I feel an outage and I feel like I'm missing out on something. And it's not every day that I walk away like I just got really filled up by the
right.
word, but it is a
Yeah.
lot more than not. And it's just crazy to me. I've been in the word for a really long time now. And so there's not a part of the Bible I come across. And I'm like, oh, I've never read that before. But it's
Mm,
crazy to me how frequently I'll come across something that was like, I for sure have read this before, but I never noticed this line, this word, this
mhm.
specific word even.
All the
And I'm like,
time.
damn, that was talking to me today, right now. And this, like,
Yeah.
it's so crazy how often it feels
Yes.
like
Yeah.
the timing and something I missed before is necessary and needed. So that I spend time in it daily, and even now, what I'll do oftentimes is like if a word catches my attention, like I'll go deep on that word. Like I actually
Mm,
love ChatGPT and like these LLMs are actually really great
yeah.
study tools for the Bible. Like, give me
Yes.
context for this chapter and where we're
Yes.
at, and like what is
What
this
did
word?
I
Like, give me
just
different
read?
translations. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I feel like I'm actually not just reading, I'm now like studying and trying to go deeper. Not It's a little bit of why do you need the context, the whole history and the context,
Yeah.
but going deeper in areas. And it's like what is that's how God speaks to people most frequently, is like he'll make something
Mm,
in scripture stand out. Like when people are like, how does God speak to you? I'm like, well, I've never heard an audible voice. I've had thoughts that have come to mind that felt like God, but
mm.
more often than not, it's like he made a word or a phrase stand out that I had never noticed before as I was reading the Bible. And like that stopped me in my tracks.
If nothing else in this interview gets published and online, like the answer to this question is like I want the world like it was like, it's incredible to have you on the podcast, but like, just like the way that you talked about that and shared that answer is just, I'm really grateful. And for sure, you're blessing people by sharing that
Hmm.
perspective of how to go deeper. So
Thanks
thank
for
you for
asking the
that.
question.
Yeah. And then I was like, we'll wrap up 3 more questions. One is, what's a piece of advice, some of the best advice you've ever been given?
Act as if. Early on in
Yeah.
my career, because I was so young and got to be in rooms I had no business being in. Like at one point, a leader pulled me aside and said, like, "Hey, I know you probably feel you're the youngest guy in the room. You're not sure how to show up. Like, act as if you belong here. Act as if it is their pleasure to have you in this meeting. Act as if you have something to bring today, right now, in this meeting, and walk in with confidence. Like, act as if."
Yes. You are full of wisdom, full of wisdom. I love it. The next one is, what is a failure that you cherish?
I mean, I think it might be that startup I talked about earlier on, like the quite like story of I took a swing, didn't know what I was doing, it didn't work out. But one of the most important things I learned in that journey was how much building the right team matters. And I had great people who I really liked, I was working with in it, but it was like basically who has what seems like the right skill and who will say yes. I was not intentional about like, here's what I'm really good at, here are my strengths, and here are the superpowers I'm going to need around me for this thing to work out well. That was an important lesson to learn, and thank goodness, like I didn't lose much on it because it was a side hustle kind of first startup journey, but it still sucks to
Mhm.
cut, literally shut down a company, but there was good learnings in that.
Yeah, for sure. And the final question. So I know you play sports, you've spoken before. So when you are introduced on a stage, what is your
Mhm.
walk on music? When you're going on the field, what's your hype song?
I don't know. The only one that came to mind immediately was "Welcome to My House." I don't know why that
Yes.
came to mind, but like I would just like I can just I can see myself like bobbing my head, like walking out with confidence, like wherever you're at. Like if I'm walking out, this is now you're in my house. Let's go.
Yes, I love it. Cool. Well, before we go, please share where people can find you. Where are you on
Sure.
social media? All the things.
Yeah. So you mentioned Daily Mo before. It's dailymo.co, not .com. So you can subscribe to my daily writing, and it is literally just like a little like booster shot of energy that every founder needs to keep going. So it's like you need a little daily motivation. That's Daily Mo is what it stands for. So it's one short quote and my thoughts on that I share in Daily Mo. So dailymo.co. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I write regularly there and contribute. So follow me or find me on LinkedIn. And then if you're interested in what we're doing at Fire Road, which is tech enabling small business America, that's our heart. It's like we believe small businesses matter more than ever today, and they are the kind of jobs that aren't getting eradicated by AI, and they provide necessary like jobs and funding to communities, and they're they're still the backbone of our communities. We believe like they need better technology. So at Fire Road, we invest in founders building technology to help small businesses scale better. So if that's of interest and you want to learn more about that, fireroad.io would be the place to do that. And yeah, I won't talk about what it is yet, but I am launching a podcast, or actually taking over a podcast that ran for years and was top 1% and was an awesome show. And
Ooh.
a friend was like, I want to hand over the reins. I'm like, cool, I guess I'm going to learn podcasting. So keep an eye out
Yes.
for that. That'll be fun. And yeah, I'll share more on that soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Katie.
Thanks for listening. If you liked something from this episode, hit share and send it to a friend or fellow leader. Don't forget to follow the show and leave a review because it helps leaders like you find us faster. This episode of Think Outside the Boss was produced by Volt Productions. I'll see you next week. And until then, keep moving forward.